Single dad CEO walked out of his blind date, until his daughter said, "But Daddy, she's nice." Marcus Chen stood in the lobby of the Rosewood Hotel, checking his watch for the third time in 2 minutes. The crystal chandelier above cast fractured light across the marble floor, and he felt every bit as fragmented as those scattered reflections. His assistant had set up this blind date against his better judgment, insisting that 2 years was long enough to grieve, long enough to be alone. Marcus disagreed, but Rebecca had been relentless, and in a moment of weakness during a particularly long board meeting, he'd agreed just to end the conversation. Now he regretted it completely. The restaurant stretched before him, all warm ambient lighting and the soft murmur of conversation that spoke of romance and possibility. These were things that felt foreign to him now, like a language he'd once spoken fluently but had somehow forgotten. He'd built Chen Technologies from the ground up, turned it into a billion-dollar empire, survived hostile takeovers and market crashes. But sitting across from a stranger and pretending to be interested in starting over? That felt impossible. His phone buzzed. Rebecca's text read simply, "Table 12. Her name is Sarah Mitchell. Be nice." Marcus exhaled slowly, straightened his tie, and forced himself to walk forward. He'd promised Rebecca he'd try. He could manage 30 minutes of polite conversation. It wasn't a merger negotiation or a shareholder meeting, but he'd survived worse. Sarah Mitchell was already seated when he arrived, and Marcus's first thought was that she looked tired. Not in an unattractive way, but in a manner that suggested she understood exhaustion on an intimate level. She had gentle brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled up at him, and there was something genuine in her expression that made him feel guilty about his plan to escape as quickly as possible. "Marcus?" she asked, standing to shake his hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "I'm Sarah. It's nice to meet you." They settled into their seats, and Marcus immediately felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Sarah ordered a glass of wine, and he ordered scotch, neat. The waiter disappeared, and silence stretched between them like an uninvited guest. "So," Sarah began, her voice warm despite the awkwardness, "Rebecca tells me you have a daughter?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. Lily was the one perfect thing in his shattered world, and he wasn't sure he wanted to share her with a stranger. "Yes. Lily. She's 5. "That's a wonderful age," Sarah said, and something in her tone suggested she actually meant it rather than just making conversation. "I teach 2nd grade, so I work with kids a bit older, but 5-year-olds have this amazing way of seeing the world. Everything is still magical." Despite himself, Marcus felt a small crack form in his defensive wall. "She does see magic everywhere. Last week she insisted that the frost on the window was a message from the Snow Queen inviting her to a ball." Sarah laughed, and the sound was unexpectedly pleasant. "Did you let her go?" "We had a ball in the living room. I wore a crown made of aluminum foil." The memory brought the ghost of a smile to his face, but it faded quickly. These moments of lightness always did, replaced by the familiar weight of grief and responsibility. The waiter brought their drinks, took their dinner orders, and vanished again. Sarah took a sip of her wine and studied him with those observant eyes. "Rebecca mentioned you weren't thrilled about tonight." Marcus appreciated the directness. "Was I that obvious?" "She said you agreed only after she threatened to schedule all your meetings back-to-back for a month with no lunch breaks." Sarah's smile was understanding rather than judgmental. "For what it's worth, I wasn't exactly enthusiastic either. My sister set this up, and she can be just as persistent as your assistant apparently is." The honesty was disarming. Marcus found himself relaxing slightly. "Why weren't you enthusiastic?" Sarah traced the rim of her wine glass with one finger, considering her answer. "Because dating feels performative. Everyone's presenting their best self, hiding the complicated parts. I teach 7-year-olds. I'm covered in glitter and marker stains half the time. I cry during commercials about puppies. I'm not sure those things translate well to first date conversation. My daughter got me a mug that says, "World's okayest dad," because I wouldn't let her have ice cream for breakfast, Marcus heard himself saying. I kept it on my desk at work until my CFO told me it was undermining my authority. They both laughed, and for a moment, the evening felt almost bearable. Their food arrived, and the conversation drifted to safer topics. Sarah talked about her students, the way they saw the world in brilliant, unfiltered color. Marcus found himself sharing stories about Lily, about the way she'd adjust his tie every morning before he left for work, insisting that it was just a little bit crooked, Daddy. But beneath the pleasant conversation, Marcus felt the familiar darkness stirring. It had been 2 years since the accident, 2 years since he'd lost Emma, but the wound felt as fresh as ever. Emma had been his college sweetheart, his partner in building Chen Technologies, the love of his life. And then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, a drunk driver had run a red light, and everything had shattered. Lily had been in the car too. She'd survived with barely a scratch, which the doctors called a miracle. But Marcus knew better. Miracles were supposed to feel joyful, and all he felt was a crushing combination of gratitude that his daughter had been spared and devastating guilt that he hadn't been there, that he couldn't protect them both. Marcus? Sarah's voice pulled him back to the present. Are you okay? He realized he'd been gripping his fork too tightly, staring at his plate without seeing it. I'm sorry. I should be honest with you. This isn't going to work. Sarah set down her own fork, her expression patient. Because? Because I'm not ready for this. I thought maybe I could go through the motions, but it's not fair to you. Marcus pulled out his wallet, extracting enough cash to cover the bill and a generous tip. I'm sorry for wasting your evening. You're not wasting anything, Sarah said gently. But I understand. Grief doesn't follow a timeline, no matter what anyone tells you. Marcus froze. What makes you think I'm grieving? The way you talk about your daughter. Like she's the only light in a very dark world. The way you checked your phone 4 times during dinner, probably looking at photos of her. The tan line on your ring finger where you wore a wedding band until recently. Sarah's voice was kind, without a trace of pity. I lost my fiancé 3 years ago. Cancer. I recognize the weight you're carrying because I carried it too. Something in Marcus's chest cracked open. He sat back down slowly. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. Being alone, raising Lily by myself, pretending I'm okay when I feel like I'm drowning most of the time. You don't have to pretend, Sarah said. Not with me. I know what drowning feels like. They talked for another hour, and it was different from before. Marcus found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone except his therapist. The way he'd hear Emma's voice sometimes, offering advice about Lily. The crushing panic he felt every time his daughter got in a car. The fear that he was failing her every single day because he didn't know how to be both mother and father. Sarah listened without trying to fix anything, without offering platitudes about time healing all wounds. She just listened, and occasionally she shared her own experiences with loss, her own struggles with moving forward while honoring the past. When they finally left the restaurant, Marcus felt lighter somehow, as if sharing the burden had made it marginally more bearable. Sarah walked beside him toward the parking area, and they stopped between their cars. Thank you, Marcus said. I didn't expect tonight to be helpful, but it was. Would you like to do this again? Sarah asked. Not a date necessarily. Just 2 people who understand what it's like to keep going when everything feels impossible. Marcus considered it. The idea of friendship, of connection with someone who understood his pain, felt less threatening than the idea of romance. I'd like that. They exchanged numbers, and Marcus drove home feeling something he hadn't felt in months, a small measure of peace. But as he pulled into his driveway, the familiar weight settled back onto his shoulders. The house was too quiet, too empty. Mrs. Rodriguez, Lily's nanny, greeted him at the door with her usual warm smile.